Hi everyone, my name is Lauren and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be filming my labour and delivery story from my third pregnancy to my son Boston, who is now 10 weeks old. This is just as much as I can remember that happened because, yeah, when you're sort of like in that moment you don't sometimes you don't really know what time it is or know how long that's been happening for, but I think I'm pretty close to what actually happened. So yeah, I'm just going to jump right in and tell you what happened. Okay, so I was 40 weeks and 5 days when I gave birth to my son. And I gave birth to him on the 30th of June this year. So on the 29th of June at about 2 a.m. and like 2 in the morning, I started having contractions. They weren't too bad, but they were very uncomfortable. And that went on for about 3 hours and then they just stopped completely. So I just carried on my day. I did end up keeping the kids home because we thought that I was going to be going into labour that day and we didn't know we weren't going to be able to sort the kids out if I was in labour or something like that. So we kept them home, and then at about lunchtime they came back again, quite strong but not very regular, just every now and then. And then Dale started work at 3 p.m. He was on night shift and so he wasn't going to go, but I was just like, there's no point in you waiting here, it could take hours and hours. And so he went to work at 3 and I was at home at my mum's with the kids, the older two kids, and then when he left my contractions were 20 minutes apart. And then that just progressed on and they sort of got closer and closer together, and then by 6:30 p.m. I had rung Dale and said, okay, you need to come home, they're 4 minutes apart now and they're really, really strong. So he came home to mum's and unfortunately they just carried on like that for hours and hours, 4 minutes apart. And then so we were all up, like my whole family, my mum, my dad, me, Dale, my brother and one of my brothers and my sister and her partner. And we're all just waiting for me to be ready to go into labour. And then it was like 12 o'clock at night and everyone was so tired, and my sister and everyone had work the next day. And then at 12:30 my contractions completely stopped and we were just like, what the heck? I was so angry because I had been in labour all day long, having pretty regular and very strong contractions, and then for them to just stop right when we thought, okay, it's going to be happening soon. So at about 12:30 everyone was like, right, obviously it was just a false alarm, we're just going to go to bed and just wake us up if you need to. And so I was like, yeah, me and Dale were sleeping in the lounge, so we got a mattress out and we're like, okay, I'm going to try and get some sleep. But I didn't think I'd be able to because I was like, oh my gosh, the heck. So I just decided to watch some TV. Dale pretty much fell asleep the second that his head hit that pillow and everyone else was asleep. And then I kid you not even 20 minutes later, my contractions came back and they were 2 minutes apart and they were super strong, and yeah, it was crazy. So I timed them for about 20 minutes, making sure that they were definitely coming 2 minutes apart. So I think you're supposed to have 3 contractions in 10 minutes, and that's when you're supposed to be ready to go to the hospital. So I timed them for 20 minutes and yep, they were definitely that close. And in that time I'm there trying to wake Dale up to tell him, and he's just completely combed out So I couldn't wake him up, and then I had texted my mum, even though she was just up the hall, text my mum to say, Mum, I'm pretty sure I need to go to the hospital now. She wouldn't reply, and so I'm like, oh God, I don't want to wake people up if it's going to be nothing, but it was really bad, and so I ended up waking Dale up eventually, and he was ringing the midwife, and I went up to my mum's room, and I knew I was going to give her a heart attack when I woke her up, and yeah, so I was just like, Mum, and she's like, got the biggest fright, woke up, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I need to go to the hospital now, and she's like, okay. So she was up, and she woke my sister up, who was coming to the hospital, and my brother was already still up. He was downstairs, so he didn't really know what was happening. So we were all up, ready to go. Talked to the midwife. She said, yep, head up now. So we all jumped in the car and headed up to the hospital. My dad stayed home with the two elder kids, and my sister's partner was still home too, because he had work very early in the morning. And so all of us headed to the hospital. Dale had texted his mum or rung his mum, and she met us there, and we arrived at the hospital at about 1:30. And I was put on the laughing gas. I don't know what the proper name for it is, but we just call it laughing gas, for pain relief. That's what I've had for my other two pregnancies as well, and it pretty much just makes me in la la land, and I don't really know what is happening around me. I just have the contractions, don't know how many contractions I've had or anything like that, but it's some good stuff. Anyway, so at about 2:30 a.m, so yeah, I'd been having contractions for about an hour after we got to the hospital, and at about 2:30 my contractions were just getting too much and I could hardly handle them. So my midwife told me to turn over onto my hands and knees on the bed. So she had put the bed up, so it was like sitting up, and I had my like arms up here, and I was just like on my hands and knees, and almost immediately my waters just went everywhere, and then I needed to turn over, and by 2:40 I was ready to push, and so I started pushing, and I did not push for very long. It felt like forever for me, but it was not very long. And he arrived at 2:47 a.m. on the 30th of June, and I was relieved to have him out. So he came out, my midwife put him on me for skin to skin, which they always do, and I was just lying there sort of like, oh thank God, trying to get over the pain and all that. And I quickly realized that he was not crying, so I was sort of like, what's happening? Why isn't he crying? And everyone around me was not answering, and I was like, hello, why isn't he crying? What's wrong? And still no one answered. I managed to open my eyes for a second, and I could see my mum standing like right in front of me, and I could tell that something wasn't right just from looking at her face. The midwife was like trying to rub Boston to like get him to cry, I guess. So she was rubbing him like they do. And my mum was standing there, and I could see tears like welling up in her eyes, and I was like, what's happening? Still no reply. And then I could sort of, I looked over at my brother and sister, and they were like, their eyes were just like, oh my gosh. And so I started to like kind of panic, but then he did start to cry, and so I was just like, oh, and everyone in the room was just like, oh my God, thank God. That was freaky. Yeah, so that was not a fun time. It felt like it was 5 hours that he wasn't breathing for, but it was only like a few minutes. And then the midwife took him and put him on the little thing to do some checks and tests or whatever they do. And my mum and everybody were just like, oh my god, he was turning purple and his eyes were just staring at us like this, and he wasn't doing any, like, he wasn't moving, and they all thought that he was dead. And yeah, they all thought he was dead, and but luckily he wasn't. Oh, getting a bit emotional there. So yeah, anyway, so he started crying, and after that everything was okay. And yeah, and so Dale stayed with me in the hospital that night, which was awesome because the other pregnancies people weren't allowed to stay, but we have a new hospital now, so your partner is allowed to stay with you for one night, I think it is. Yeah. So after that traumatic entrance, we were like, okay, he's fine now, everything's going to be good. But that unfortunately wasn't quite the case. So if you guys would like to hear what happened in the following days after his birth, let me know in the comments below and I'll make a video about that. But I hope you've enjoyed listening to my labour and delivery experience, and I'm sorry if it wasn't very informative, but this is just sort of from my point of view how it went. And yeah, so thank you guys all so much for watching. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up if you have enjoyed it, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye bye.